and welcome to Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast with Renae Hanvin, which is all about inspiring you to start thinking and doing disasters a little bit differently too. In this episode, I'm talking with Briony Towers, founder of Leadrrr, and we're talking about our school's key to social capital. So a little bit about Briony. She's a researcher and practitioner working in the field of child-centred disaster risk management. She completed her PhD on children's knowledge of vulnerability and resilience to bushfire at the University of Tasmania in 2011, and then spent almost 10 years as an academic at RMIT, where she led the Bushfire and Natural Hazards CRC project on child-centred disaster risk reduction. In 2021, Briony wanted to spend more time on research, translation and implementation. So she set up Leadrrr, which stands for Learning Ecologies for Action on DRR and Resilience. Through Leadrrr, Briony has been supporting emergency agencies, local government, NGOs and other organisations to develop research-informed programs that involve children and young people as genuine participants in disaster risk management. She's also recently joined the School of Education at Deakin University. I like to start with where we met. Now, Briony is someone that everyone knows in the disaster resilience sector, especially if you're from Victoria. She's the guru in school-based education for disaster risk reduction and really championing youth-led approaches to understanding and managing risk. Funnily enough, when I asked Briony to be on my podcast, we were talking to each other about when we last met in person, because we hear about each other often, so we know what each other's up to, but we don't always actually cross paths. We think we met face-to-face last time back in 2017, so before COVID, which clearly means we need another face-to-face catch-up soon. Briony, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Renae. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've just shared in the intro that we realised we hadn't seen each other in person since I think about 2017. So clearly we have to change that. We have to sort of face-to-face catch up soon. But in the meantime, can you share a bit more about your background and why disasters and why youth?
So I always wanted to work with youth. Even in my undergrad, I was studying behavioural science with a view to working with youth in that kind of psychology space. I then took a break from that for a couple of years and I worked in Japan teaching English to youth. Then I came back and I worked in a whole range of jobs in schools. I worked as an integration aide. I've always just loved working in education and with children and young people. And it was actually through that job when I was working as an integration aide that I was working with a lot of the students who were either autistic or had developmental delay or other kind of learning issues, supporting them in the classroom. And I really loved that. And I really loved working with the psychologists who would come in and kind of design their programs for them. And it was actually one of the parents of one of the children that I was working with said, you need to go back to uni, you need to do your honours and you need to do your masters and you need to do what the psychologist is doing in the school with these children. And I thought, yes, that sounds like a great idea. So I went back to do my honours in psych and I actually went to UTAS to do it because I thought that would be a good idea away from the distractions of kind of everyday life. And immerse myself in that honours year. And then at the end of the year, one of my lecturers, Douglas Patton, asked me what I was planning to do next. And I said, well, I'm going to do my clinical masters and I'm going to work with children and young people. And he said, oh, well, what about you do a PhD in children and bushfire? And I thought, oh, that's a bit random. Anyway, it sounded really interesting and I'd really enjoyed learning from him in that honours year. And so I applied for a PhD scholarship and got it and started working on that project, which was focused on children's knowledge of vulnerability and resilience to bushfire in southeastern Australia, and started travelling around Tassie, visiting schools, doing focus groups with children and young people, and was just really interested in the level of engagement in their level of engagement in those discussions. They were really interested in bushfire. They hadn't had any a lot of them hadn't had any bushfire education before. Those who had it through their family networks, mum or dad is at fire brigade or whatever. But then I had all this data and I didn't really know what to do with it. And at that time, there was no research on children's knowledge of bushfire or bushfire education for children or anything like that. So that's about 2006. So I was really kind of out there on my own and it was quite lonely. There was really nothing for me to read.
Yeah.
No literature. I really felt like I was kind of just, really kind of moving around in the dark. But I did know that what these children had to say and that the ideas that they had and that their understanding that they were developing around bushfire, even just in those discussions that we were having, was really important.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of a big turning point for me in that work was coming across Catherine Haynes' work. So people might know Kat's work. She's done a lot of research in human dimensions of bushfire response and flood response. And she's a really great researcher. But at that time, she was working on a big project with Plan International and the Institute of Development Studies on child-led disaster risk reduction in Indonesia and the Philippines and El Salvador.
Yeah.
And so when I came across that work, I thought, oh, this is where I fit.
Found a friend. I found
there are things happening. There are people working on this. And so I think from that point, because, obviously Plan is a child rights-based NGO, and Kat's work in that area was very, child rights focused. And so then I guess my work kind of took on more of a child rights focus as well. And then it was around that same time that Laurie Peake published a special issue of Children, Youth and Environments around children and disasters. And so connecting with her as well was really great. So all of a sudden I felt like, oh, there is,
a tribe.
This research is legitimate. These research questions are important, and the data that I'm gathering with these children really matters. And then Black Saturday happened. And so all of a sudden the data that I had, and then the recommendations that came out of the Royal Commission, the recommendation 6 for bushfire education to be included in the formal curriculum, that I suppose just created opportunities to start implementing or utilising some of that research from my PhD.
Yeah, well, it's the direct relevance, isn't it? It's unfortunately.
Yeah. So that's when the fire agencies got really serious about designing and implementing bushfire education programs. And so I started working on a project, Bushfire Natural Hazard CRC project with Professor Kevin Ronan. He was at CQU, I was at RMIT. And we were really lucky. We had some really good funding for a few years to work really closely with the emergency management agencies. And we evaluated different programs. We worked with different schools and school communities. And that was a really, I only realise now how fortunate we were to have that funding.
Yeah.
I think I was a very young green researcher and I think I took it for granted a little bit. But we did accomplish a lot through that, and that was we had there wasn't a lot going on. We had to really search hard to find things to research. So
and that's quite extraordinary. I mean, I think your story is kind of similar to mine. Like, we kind of fell into the emergency management space and the risk reduction space, and then found our little kind of nugget of passion and interest, and then I guess had our own pathway, because same for me with business communities. I mean, I still have a pretty lonely existence in some ways, but youth and children, I mean, Gosh, they are absolutely fundamental in the before, during, and after stages of, the disaster conversation. It's been so great to see, you and what you've been driving and the change and just the industry and the sector talking about it as well. And, that's what I think, the likes of you and I in the sector, it's about bringing new things and then not just doing the research, but absolutely translating it and embedding it into cultures. And that is really key. Now, you said we've spoken before, you've collaborated with a lot of schools and kids on projects, including ones that have won some awards. I've always seen a few of your projects up in the Resilient Australia Awards, etc. Can you share a couple that have sort of stood out to you or are really kind of important to you and why?
Yeah, so I think one of the projects that was a real turning point for me was working with the Strathewen Bushfire Education Partnership, so with Strathewen Primary School and the Arthurs Creek Fire Brigade. And listeners have probably come across the really beautiful work that the children produce through that program, the films and the claymations and the storybooks and everything else.
It is amazing, and I was secretly hoping you'd mention that one.
So I mean, and that was really important, I suppose, for a couple of reasons for me, because first of all, I was able to spend a lot of time in the school just participating in the program activities. So they have their community helper days where all the community members and brigade members and people from further afield come in and work with the children for the day to do all the labour that's required of a claymation that goes for 6 minutes. And I think just, being able to spend so much time talking to Jane Haywood, the principal, and Di, one of her teaching staff, and of course Lisa O'Brien from the brigade, and Jamie McKenzie, who comes up from Anglesea to teach the kids about the fire science kind of thing. And and I think just being able to learn from them and all of their different perspectives. Jane from an education perspective, what does this mean for her as a teacher? Lisa as a brigade member and someone who was heavily involved and a real leader in the community-led recovery after Black Saturday, and then Jamie, who is just a real innovator in terms of developing programs and trainings for leadership. So being able to learn from them was a pretty amazing education, and I think gave me a really good grounding in what really matters.
And don't you think, I think too, Briony, it's a real, I guess, example of an outcome of activating shared responsibility. Like, since 2011, we all have a role to play, but we're not going to define those roles, because then that would probably mean we'd have to actually, be held accountable for them. But I think initiatives that bring, different perspectives and, young, old, government, non-government, everyone together to kind of create, solutions or, again, cultural changes or norms or behaviours that, build awareness, build capacity, and it enables, again, the young kids to kind of identify where they fit and what their role is and what they can do. And it's not just learning and listening, like they can actively take roles in, getting prepared and better understanding and, getting the parents to do stuff at home. I mean, there's so much power in those sorts of programs.
Yeah, and I think, that's where I really saw the power of like that truly collaborative approach at the grassroots, with Lisa, from the brigade and Jane in the school. The way they were working together was, very, very just highly collaborative. And they would identify and solve problems together and design the whole program together, and both take responsibility for seeing it through to the final outcome. So that was really important. But I think also too, the really great thing about Strathewen Primary School and the partnership is their willingness to take risks.
Yep.
I mean, the children are kind of raised in that environment of where they're willing to take risks with their learning. But also, you know, for Lisa and Jane, they were always willing to take risks, and I'd kind of take ideas to them sometimes. And one of them was that we should get the children to evaluate the program themselves, because I'd done a kind of formal evaluation and published that, and they wanted to keep evaluating the program, but they didn't have any budget for that. And so I suggested that they do a student-led evaluation. Let's let the children evaluate it, which fitted really nicely with their philosophies. But you know, they were into it. You know? And
I love it.
Even though we'd never done it before, I'd never done it before. There were very few examples at that time of that kind of work actually being done, and that led
but what
to
a great outcome. And I guess, you know,
presented at the ADA conference their results, and it was just
I remember seeing that. It was awesome.
So I think that was another thing that I learned in that school environment as well, is that you need to be a bit brave and
think differently,
take chances, and you know, and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail, but we don't move forward unless we take a chance. So
100%. And I think, you know, thinking differently and doing differently, because that's, you know, we can't do the same thing as what's been done before, because then we're never going to change. Now, as you know, Briony, I've been mentioning to you, and obviously you've, I think, a little bit excited, but we're doing some work on social capital with Professor Daniel Aldrich. And I'm really interested, I guess my lens is the role that small businesses and nonprofits can play in building and strengthening community connections. And so over the past 5 years, been working with Professor Daniel Aldrich and his global data, and we're piloting a project as part of a Disaster Ready Fund Round 2 project in South Australia at the moment, which is super exciting. Now, he doesn't typically include schools when measuring social infrastructure, which I was a bit like, what do you mean? But just in communities that he's been working with across the world, they've just not decided, or it's not been identified to include schools. But we're creating a national framework in social capital and social infrastructure measurement. And absolutely, schools are definitely on the list, which when he's over in Australia next month, actually, he's here for for about 8 weeks. Because, you know, I've got kids in schools, and the school is the epicenter of our community, and the WhatsApp group chats for, you know, the parents and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think I'd get through half the day if I didn't have those connections, and connections obviously with, you know, into the principals and the teachers and the education staff, but all the connections around the school and the place. Like, you know, every weekend we're up there, you know, shooting basketball hoops or whatever it might be. So my question to you is, are schools like key to social capital, and like why? Why do you think, from your research? And then I can tell Daniel.
I think they definitely are. It's really interesting though that Daniel hasn't incorporated schools into his social capital research, because I haven't really incorporated social capital into my research.
Oh, well, so there we go.
It goes both ways. Don't worry. However, you know, having reconnected with you recently and kind of thinking, I really must look at the social capital literature. I mean, I guess I've kind of followed it at a surface level, but not really thought about how it applies to my own work. My own work has been, you know, very much grounded in kind of theories and concepts of, you know, agency and child participation and and that kind of thing. So it was really interesting kind of looking at the literature on social capital and just saying, we've been building social capital, and we've been harnessing the existing social capital that is in the schools that we work with. And so that's been really, really interesting. And I think that's something that we can be incorporating a lot more into the kind of theoretical frameworks and kind of explanatory frameworks that we're using for our work. But I think, you know, and you'll have to excuse my pretty rudimentary knowledge.
And we're going to start somewhere.
Social capital research, but kind of just looking at those key, or, you know, those main areas of bonding, bridging and linking social capital. I think the work that we're doing in schools, and the work that school staff and students and the whole school community are doing very much. We've got some great examples. So for that bonding social capital, every research project we do or every program we develop really demonstrates the power of influence on their households and amongst their peers. So first of all, thinking about when we actually adopt these approaches that where children are taking ownership of their learning and action, we do see them really sharing their knowledge with their families, but most importantly, asking questions. I think there's always been this assumption that children can go home and kind of tell their parents, what they need to do to prepare or plan for an emergency. But I think one of the most powerful things that we've seen children do is go home and start asking questions.
100%. Yep.
And we have the
dinner table discussion.
Come home and they start asking you questions, and they start, they help you to identify the gaps in your knowledge and the gaps in what you've done in terms of your planning or preparedness or
100%.
whatever. So there's definitely that side of things, but then also what we've found is that the students, they really want to teach each other.
Yeah.
And they really want to make sure that everybody in their school is aware and informed and prepared. And that's something that, I think is really, always really impresses me. They have a really strong ethic of care.
Yep.
Where now that they have this information about warnings or plans or whatever it is, they feel this sense of responsibility to share that with everybody else. And I think one of the projects that we did at Harkaway Primary School involved the students developing a bushfire safety manifesto. Where they identified 4 key points that they wanted to see implemented, or 4 key actions that they want to see implemented in their school for bushfire education. And one of them was that they want to teach others. And they see themselves as being really well positioned to educate each other because, as they say, we know what other kids know and don't know.
Correct.
And we know how to explain things in a way that other kids will understand.
100%.
So I think that kind of children or students as educators piece is really crucial.
And particularly in the bridging ties as well. You think school to schools and, like that kind of connection, 100%. Yeah.
And again, the work that we've done with Upwey High School, we did participatory action research with the students, at year 7 to 10 students, on student participation in school bushfire planning. And once they'd done that work and they'd identified problems and developed solutions, and we developed a framework for, student participation in school bushfire planning, and they're like, we need to get this to other schools. We need other schools to be involved in this as well, because they identified that before they had participated in the project, they didn't understand what the fire danger ratings mean. They didn't know. They didn't really understand the school's policies around school closure on catastrophic fire danger days. And, as we worked through the project, they identified that as, a really serious risk in the community. And once they had that understanding, they again wanted to make sure that other schools were going to be making sure that everybody had that knowledge and awareness and had plans for those days.
And that's, I guess, the whole kind of notion of social capital in kind of the disaster resilience for me. It's about, you know, those connections then drive conversations, and then it's the content in those conversations. So that's why I'm so, you know, passionate about bringing in some measurement into the ecosystem of risk reduction and resilience, so that if we can measure how connected those communities are, then we can look at, okay, well, where there's connections, let's heighten those conversations and get them talking more. And then if there are really great conversations happening at a certain school district, let's connect them into, you know, like-minded, you know, schools in other high-risk areas to kind of, you know, learn, you know, teach the teachers and stuff in that kind of, you know, kid-to-kid environment. Absolutely spot on.
And then I think it works the other way too, Renae, as well, is that, you know, we go into schools and we do this work, and it would be great for us to be able to measure the social capital that we're building through those.
100%. Yeah.
Because, you know, much to people's surprise often is that students really love engaging in this work. And, you know, they're really proactive in, you know, in actually taking advantage of these opportunities to learn and connect and make a change in their, you know, in their school communities and their neighborhoods. So, and even, you know, and then even at a policy level, I think that's where it goes to that linking social capital, is that, you know, once we see the children, they start to connect with their family and their peers and, you know, their school community on these, you know, around these issues, and then they start to go a bit broader. But, you know, like we saw at Upway, once the students had finished that project and had identified that this was a huge gap, you know, that student knowledge and participation in school bushfire planning represented a really big gap in the local emergency management planning, they took it to council. They made a submission to council to tell local council that this was an issue that they wanted to see addressed. So so the students actually learning, you know, how to access those halls of power and engage in that decision and influence decision making as well.
Which is so, I mean, that's the goal. Do you know what I mean? That's the gold end outcome of, you know, what I guess, you know, a focus of social capital and social infrastructure could be. Because even, again, the places of schools. So, you know, the school, I guess the structure of the school is, you know, such a trusted place in the community and an active place in the community. So, you know, enabling the decision makers, so the state governments or the councils or whatever, to think differently about the schools, and it's not just a place that kids go, you know, Monday to Friday, but like, what is that when a disaster or disruption occurs, or, you know, in the preparedness planning and that as well. So I guess identifying the different roles the school and the people in the school can play as an epicenter, in my opinion, particularly in, you know, outer regional kind of communities as well. I mean, it's we'll sort of catch up with Professor Aldrich when he's here in Melbourne, and we'll ask him why, and we'll get a bit more information. And then perhaps we can challenge with going for some future funding, Briony, and create some programs and test a bit more here, because I'm it's a space that I'm really interested in. And I think I had heard that there's a national discussion group around schools and them being places of, I guess, communities use outside of school hours. So I know there is some talk in that instance, which again, I'm kind of sort of following a little bit, but definitely once we complete the pilot project and then cross fingers, hopefully one day can scale it up into a national index, then, you know, we can really then deep dive into some key kind of places in communities that are really, you know, really critical and really important and need to have a different sort of light shined on them, I think. Now, I always like to end this podcast asking, what would be the 2 things that you'd like to be done differently in the disaster space?
Really like to see children and youth engaged as genuine partners in the development of disaster risk management policies, plans and standards. We've made some progress. We have a long, long way to go. A lot of policies and programs and strategies are still developed without any direct involvement from children and young people. And children and young people aren't happy about it, let me tell you. And they're very aware that they're being excluded, especially especially at that high school level.
Yep.
And this is something that our Upway students feel really passionately about, and are kind of really starting to step up as advocates for. And as one of the students said, we ran a panel discussion at ADA last year. The students came down and we streamed it online, and it was really an opportunity for them to kind of reflect on their experiences of the project that they've been involved in with us, but also, be able to speak from, their own experience to, people in decision-making roles. And one of the students said, do you design policies and programs for First Nations people without involving First Nations people? Do you design policies and programs for disabled people without involving disabled people? Why is it okay to design policies and programs for young people without involving us? It's not okay. So I think that's something that I would really like to work on with children and young people, and actually start creating some opportunities and for them to advocate at the local, state and federal level for their genuine inclusion in that space. And then the other thing I would say is we really need long-term dedicated funding to be directed towards children and youth in the disaster risk management space. Most projects are project-based. They're conducted or undertaken with grants. It's government grants or philanthropic grants, very rarely directly from the budget of government departments or agencies. And we've been able to do some really great work and kind of develop some really good programs and projects with that kind of funding. But then the funding runs out, and it's and everything falls over. So I'd really like to see some dedicated funding to children and youth, from research organisations, and also within the departments and agencies that are actually doing disaster risk management.
I think, again, don't get me wrong, the grant fundings are great, and very, very grateful for them, but I think you're so right. You spend, we worked with Kangaroo Island for a couple of years, and then it finishes and then you're gone, like it's gonskis. And it's kind of like you can set up some really great structures, but the sustainability, you've got to keep it going long term. Like it's not just a 12-month or a 18-month kind of initiative that then they can take over and own. It's so much longer. But we'll see where we can see it in future opportunities for social capital about embedding the schools, because I think you're so right. Again, it's about doing things differently. This is where I think the sector has sort of changed a little bit, but I think there's a long way to go with not just doing it how it's been done or in that command and control kind of approach. Like particularly in the resilience and risk reduction space, there's a whole new way of doing stuff that can actually be quite cost effective. Like it's not big massive million squillion dollar budgets that are required, but it is that long-term recognition and dedication and input. 100%. A massive thank you, Briony, founder of Leadrrr, for talking to me today about our school's key to social capital. And clearly, I think we have a big yes to that answer. Really awesome to chat with you, and let's catch up for a coffee soon.
Thanks, Renae.
I hope today's episode of Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast, has inspired you to think a little bit differently about the role you can play before, during, and after disasters. Given the new era of more frequent and compounding disasters that we are now in, let's work together to build an all-hazards disaster resilient future for all. Find out more about the work I'm leading as a social enterprise building disaster resilience at resilientready.org. Don't forget to subscribe to Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast, through your preferred platform. And we'll see you next time when we discover new ways of doing disasters differently together.